All right, what is up, friend and fellow anti-netter? So, my girlfriend and I, the love of my life, we just moved into our new home this past weekend. And because we don't have a TV, we have been reading and enjoying life while sipping some wine at night and in the evenings. And last night we were reading a book together, and I think we played Yahtzee correctly, maybe. We also played a game of Yahtzee, and then we went to essentially listening to lo-fi music and reading together, reading a book together. Now, I decided to pick up and start reading a book on Voltaire. And what's crazy is I started reading the book back in like maybe 2021, like even before I wrote the Anti-Net Zettelkasten book. And however, at the time that I started reading that book back in 2021, I had finally learned and discovered like what bib cards were. And, this was after reading Zanke Ahrens's book, How to Take Smart Notes. And, he describes literature notes, which I think he has like no idea what the hell he's even talking about. It's described so vaguely, and like he doesn't even tell you what they actually were. He just gives this pedantic, vague academic definition of what a literature note is, which is an invented term. And so, at the time, I discovered like bib cards and bibliography cards and bib notes from diving deep into Nicholas Luhmann's actual Zettelkasten and reading it. And so I learned what bib cards were. And so back in 2021, I started reading a book called Voltaire, and wrote out some bib notes. And then I stopped. I stopped maybe I don't know, like 7 pages into the book. Very, very I didn't make much progress at all because I had other things that I was reading and working on. Well, here we are a few years later, and I've picked up the book, and I've picked up exactly where I've left off. I read this long introduction, and I made some bib notes, and I basically looked at the bib card, and I've been able to pick up without having to start over from scratch. And I've done this many times over, where I'll make it maybe a quarter of the way through the book, a quarter of the way, or halfway, or even maybe 3/4 of the way, and I'll just get sick of it. I'll get tired of the book, and then I'll move on to something that's more entertaining for me to read. And mind you, there's a few different ways to read. There's different types of books, right? The books I like to read in the evenings is stuff that has no apparent practical purpose, and that maybe a biography on Voltaire, or even Napoleon and stuff like that, right? Just these beast of books, right? For instance, here's the Napoleon book I read a few months ago, right? It's just a beast of a book, right? Has no practical purpose. However, I've been able to gather and basically extract a lot of seemingly absurd practical lessons and apply it to what I'm working on and what I write about. And the overarching thing here is that what a Zettelkasten allows you to do while reading, especially with bib cards, is once you get sick and tired of a book and it doesn't entertain you, put it down, because you can pick it up, and in no time, because you can glance at the bib card and all of the notes, kind of re-jog your memory and re-inject your memory and your working memory with all of the things that you read without having to start over from the beginning, because you've extracted only the things that matter and written it out by hand on a bib card. And my girlfriend's been working her way through a book that I gave her, and it's kind of like a boring, dry book, but it's really well written, and it's a really good book. It's by Brian Tracy, and it's called Goals. Well, she's been kind of slowly slogging a page or two a night, at a time through this book, and I told her last night, I'm like, hey, why don't you just put it down and start another book? Who cares? Read something that's actually entertaining and invigorates your mind and gets you excited. And she said, and this, I've been through this before, she's like, I don't know, I cannot put down a book without finishing it. I have to finish it. And this is a philosophy actually Bill Gates talks about. Bill Gates has a rule where he always finishes a book. He never starts a new book unless he's finished his previous book. And then on the flip side, you have a guy like Naval Ravikant, who is a well-read person. He's a brilliant mind. He's someone that has invested. He was an angel and early stage investor in companies like Twitter and just a ton of companies, and he's co-founded a lot of companies. He's done very, very well, and he's kind of the prototypical Silicon Valley Zen mind type of character. And what he says is, on the flip side, he goes I'll read a few pages. He has got 50 books on his Kindle, and he'll just like read a few pages at a time until he gets bored, until he loses interest. Now, this used to be me as well, but what would happen when I would be using a Kindle or any digital device is I would, leave the book and then forget I ever had it, forget I ever owned it, and you just forget about it. It goes into the black hole of cyberspace and you just forget about it. And that's the problem with reading on digital devices versus taking the Zettelkasten approach to reading. When you read with the Zettelkasten, you put the book down, but you install that bib card in the book. It allows you to read like many books at once and then pick it up like years later when you get excited about that book again. Okay? And so that's, one thing I want to like instill in your mind. When you adopt the Zettelkasten approach, it's totally okay to just like, literally, I'm reading probably about like 50 books right now, like slowly, that I'll probably, get to and finish all 50 of them, maybe in like 15 years, right? But I'm chipping away at them and I like read them little bits at a time. I put my bib card in them and I pick them up whenever I get excited about them again, right? So I did the same exact thing, recently with like the F. Scott Fitzgerald book. Like I read a little bit, I put in a bib card in it, and I said, I'll pick it up again when I'm interested. And that's what I'm doing with this Voltaire book, okay? So you don't actually need to finish a freaking book, every single book that you read. Now, I will say this, is that when you are working on like a project or your own book and you're in deep writing mode, it feels good to just knock it out and like sit down at a desk and finish the entire book. But otherwise, you can just read without finishing anything. I want to show you this, okay? So here is, I don't know if you can see this good lighting. I'm just going to walk around. Like, I've got a bib card sticking out of this book, like I'll probably finish that someday. Bib card sitting out of this book. Same with this book. These are books that I've like started to read, and then I, make my way through them, and I go, okay, well, I'm kind of bored right here, so I'm going to put it down and I'm going to start reading something else. And like, here's even more examples. This book, I've made my way like 75% through the book. I'll just put my bib card in it so I can pick it up where I left off. Same with this book, Chimpanzee Politics, right? And, I started reading this back in like probably 2022, and I put it down. I started reading it again recently, and I picked back up where I left off. So this is a way for you to be able to, when you adopt the Zettelkasten workflow, it's a way for you to be able to just read and be okay with putting things down. Just read like a machine. Read with what interests you. Put things down. Some things, like when I like to work on a project, I'll take a book, like this one, for instance. If I'm going to write a book on storytelling, right, I will just go through this book and make it my mission to sit down for like an hour or two a day and just go through this deliberately. Otherwise, I'll just pick up books and read when I read until the point where I lose interest. And so that's something I want to share with you. And so here's what, like, I'm going to show you some of my bib cards, okay? So let's see here. Okay, yeah. So imagine like when you pick up a book that you've put down for 2 years, and then you open it up and you have all these notes with the page number, with just brief summaries of, what actually you read. It's a way for you to actually, ingest and get in the book everything that you've read up to that point in your working memory, even if you started reading it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and you would seemingly have forgotten about it and have to start all over. No, you don't. And this, isn't the case when you, go through, Kindle or read a book on Kindle, because you're just like a freaking highlighting machine and you highlight so much good and so much irrelevant material. That's, once again, why the analog approach works, why the anti-net Zettelkasten approach works, doing things the old way, the hard way. This added friction, it makes you, it basically induces selectivity and forces you to only select the really, really important things. Now, I talk about this, I believe it's in the chapter on selection. I'll just show you this. Is in this chapter on selection in my anti-net Zettelkasten book, I talk about the whole process of how the anti-net Zettelkasten and the workflow of using physical, basically the physical workflow forces you to actually select knowledge that is relevant. Whereas with digital, it's a lot harder. Like, what you want to do and focus on is you want to select ideas that I call irresistible ideas that are both urgent and important. And when you read with a bib card, not only does it add friction, allows you to select more critical and important ideas, it also will enable you to read like I'm reading. You can read like 50 books at a time, and maybe in 15 years you'll complete all of them, which is awesome. Like, there's some natural, I don't know, voice that speaks to all of us where we internally, intuitively know that, hey, I should be reading this book, I should plug through this book, I've lost interest, this other book is a higher priority for me. And that's what the Zettelkasten approach to reading and thinking and writing introduces. So it's freaking okay to read 50 books at a time. It's okay to put books down. It's okay to start and stop. And don't feel that guilt like, Bill Gates essentially forces himself to feel, where he won't start a new book without finishing the last one. Some books just fizzle out and just, implode on themselves, and you get the point, like 30 pages in, and you don't have to read the whole frickin' thing. You can also, if this is still something that, what I've done before, is you can just skim read the last bit of it, okay? So the bottom line is, once you start adopting a Zettelkasten approach to reading and thinking and writing, you're going to be able to pick this up and exercise that mind of the way to read more effectively as you go. So hope that helps. Hope that gives you an idea. And always remember to stay crispy, my friend. Peace.